Welcome to another SV Lynx video. The past few videos have been almost exclusively about the construction of SV Lynx, which is what we spend almost all our working hours on, so it makes sense. However, all work and no play make Jack a dull boy.
Or, in our case, we need to think about other things occasionally to keep our sanity while we sand our boat.
So, though we will be showing you progress on building our performance catamaran this week, we decided to also talk about another sailing subject, and we'll try to do so in the future build videos, at least some of the time.
And that should be more entertaining for our viewers, breaking up all the boat work segments.
So, for this week's video, we'll talk about our sail plan for SV Lynx, though you may think we're a long way from needing sails since we haven't finished the boat yet. It actually makes some sense to discuss this topic now, since we've been in talks this week with one of our sponsors about one of our 5 sails being made for SV Lynx.
To begin our discussion on sails, let's start by going over the most basic sail plan for any typical cruising cat. A mainsail and jib. Just those 2 sails could get you anywhere you want to go, but that doesn't mean it would be the most efficient sail plan for all points of sail and strengths of wind. For that, skippers would want to add additional sails to their locker.
Typically, the next sail many cat owners would add is a Code 0. This is a light material, genoa-style head sail that sheets beyond the mast toward the stern, thus gaining a lot of additional square footage of a sail over a normal jib, which sheets in front of the mast. A Code 0 is kind of a jack-of-all-trades sail for lighter winds, allowing the boat to sail up or downwind.
The issue we have with a Code 0 is, like many jack-of-all-trades, it's a master of none. In this case, that means it isn't the most efficient sail for going up or downwind, but can be used for both in light air.
If you just want to carry 3 sails, then this would be a good choice for that 3rd sail, as it will handle a lot of different light wind situations adequately, but not perfectly.
For the 4th sail, most cats choose to add either a traditional spinnaker or an asymmetric spinnaker for light downwind sailing.
The difference between those 2 options is that a spinnaker is generally larger than an asymmetric, but the traditional spinnaker is more limited to nearly straight downwind sailing, or an asymmetric can be rotated around to greater choices of wind angle for downwind sailing. For that reason, most skippers choose to go with an asymmetric spinnaker nowadays.
And those 4 sails are the typical complement for many cats. Now, let's see how work has been going on our cat build this week, before we start talking about which sails we are going with on SV Lynx.
Well, it's Tuesday morning, and the reason it's Tuesday and it's not Monday is that Monday we came up with a small bit of a problem, and we had to solve it. So I got on the phone and talked to Schionning, and the solutions they had to the problem weren't adequate for my needs. The problem is that we have to put a roll of epoxied fiberglass inside of this trough that we cut into here. But they want us to put a 20 millimeter thick rope and leave 5 millimeters of extra space on the outside so that we can fill that with thickened epoxy so that we can round off the edges for when we wrap these with fiberglass. The problem is there are no rabbit bits that go that deep that we can find, and we have looked and looked. I've asked Schionning about one, I've asked other people about them, but nobody can seem to find a rabbit bit that goes deep enough to route out these boards. And the routing we showed you last week turns out to just not be deep enough, again, to get that 25 millimeter depth that we need to put in our rolled up epoxy and fiberglass. So the solutions that were offered were to melt it out, the foam, with a soldering iron or wire, but Schionning didn't really like that solution simply because it could heat up the laminate and they don't really like that. Could cause some delamination on the edge. So the other one is to take an oscillating tool and cut above and below, and then just try to eat your way out all the way along. Well, that's going to make a very rough edge that would have to be some kind of sanded on the inside. It's going to take forever, and I just don't like the quality of the removal that we're going to get doing it by that method. So I came up with a new method of doing it. We're going to use a router, a different kind of router bit, but to use it and not take out the laminate, we have to be able to get the depth and the height both adjusted on the router, and I don't really have anything that can do that. So what I did on Monday is I spent some time modeling a two-part piece that will be adjustable, that can mount onto our router and create these routed out portions of these panels cleanly. And so this is the model that you're looking at right now, and sort of this is how it works. I'll slide it a little bit. And it allows us to adjust the depth of the distance this direction here. And the router itself will be able to adjust the depth of the bit going in. So we can dial in exactly how deep we want it to go and exactly how far or up we want that bit to sit. And then we can just run that new jig that we put onto the router right along the edges and route these out. The only places where it's not going to work are where there's a bend like that right there. But that's okay because we'll just take a Dremel and clean up that one little corner area. But anywhere that we're going straight, which is 90% of it all, we'll be able to use this new jig. So now that I've modeled this, we will need to 3D print it. And fortunately, Engitype, a 3D printing sales company, has sponsored our project. And John Savage, the owner of that, has kindly loaned us a Markforged Mark II 3D printer to print these parts. So we'll get started on that, and thank you again to Engitype, and of course to Markforged for their excellent printer. So while we're waiting for that part to print, which will take about 12 hours, we've got plenty of other things to do. And so this morning we've already put the next penultimate board on the lower section on. It's epoxying right now, and I didn't show you that because we showed you putting on plenty of those boards. But we will show you the last board, which will go in later today on the lower section. It's the last one, so we'll show you that one when we put it on. But meanwhile, at this point, we're going to move on to a completely different task. We're going back to the canoe, and we're going to do some more sanding because everybody loves sanding. But this time we put on some parts there where we patched up all the little holes and such in the side of the hull. And I've already put the epoxy on. Marianne got involved with that. And now we're going to do some sanding now that it's hardened up.
I love sanding.
Do you love sanding?
I love sanding.
It's a good thing because I'm pretty sure that's most of what we do building a boat. So on we go to sanding. So Brian's busy blowing out the inboard side of this port hull now, getting all of the dust out of the cracks, and then we'll acetone wipe it all down, start marking all the little spots that we might have to do a little filler on, and get to that. Meanwhile, on the other side of this hull, I've marked some additional spots that we need to put some filler into beyond what we already did or what Marianne did the other day, because she missed a few spots, so I marked them all. And you can see the blue tape marking the different little spots that I have to do some fixes on. And then once those epoxy's on there, then we'll sand that hull down and also do the epoxy on these little patches on this side as well. Unfortunately, we can't fit any clamps on anymore over here. There's just not enough space. So to get these boards leveled out, we had to screw in some little blocks, but no big deal. We have to fill the holes for these anyway to a couple more holes. Won't be any big problem. It's the final plank on. So we've got this whole side epoxied now. That's good news because while this cures up tonight, tomorrow we can get all these screws out and sand this thing and start putting in the carbon fiber. Yay, finally. So that's what's up tomorrow. Today we're wrapping up now and let this cure overnight. So, back to our talk about sails. For SV Lynx, we've chosen to stray from the normal 4 sails we talked about earlier: a mainsail, jib, code 0, and asymmetric spinnaker. And we're going to go with a somewhat different set of sails. Not that other boats don't choose this route, but not that many.
We plan to go a bit more specialized with all our sails, which means we'll have to carry more sails, as we mentioned. 5 to be exact. Let's start with the types of mainsails and what we chose for SV Lynx.
First, there's the traditional triangular mainsail. The issue with this version is that they are not the most aerodynamic shape, since the narrow tip at the head creates vortices and gives you little lift, and they have less square footage of sail, being nearly a perfect triangle.
That's why you may have noticed a bit more square top mainsails on cats these days, especially on a performance catamaran like SV Lynx.
With a square top mainsail, you get more square footage of sail and more sail higher up where the wind is stronger, which is especially useful for downwind sailing. So we would have gone with one of these mainsails if there had been no other option.
However, there is a third option, and in our case, finding this sail was like the Goldilocks story. We want the porridge that is just right. For us, that turns out to be a high roach mainsail.
If you compare the square footage of a high roach and square top mainsail, there isn't much difference. And though the wind is stronger aloft, the top of a square top main will twist open in stronger winds, thus losing some of that power. And that makes the total power of these 2 sails about the same in most sailing situations.
There are 2 issues we have with a square top mainsail. The first is the difficulty in raising the sail. You have to go forward to the mast and hook up the head of the sail to the car, or you have to purchase a special car and gaff system to help you raise the sail without going forward.
Those systems are not cheap and can have their own challenges. A high roach sail does not require one of these systems, so it's just easier to raise and saves the cost of the gaff-rigged main.
The second issue we had with the square top main is that when reefing, the sail shape becomes more rectangular in the second and third reefs, which isn't as nice for trimming.
So, since these 2 sails perform similarly most of the time, we decided to go with the high roach mainsail because it eliminated that issue of raising the square top main or purchasing a car and gaff system, and we think trimming the sail while reefed will be much better.
But we didn't make this choice on our own. We discussed our boat with our sail loft and asked Ullman Sails what they recommended for our Solitaire 1520 performance cruising catamaran.
Without prompting from us, they suggested a high roach main, which is the same conclusion we had already reached after doing our own research. So that's what we ordered for our mainsail from Ullman Sails.
Before we get to which jib we went with, let's check back on what was happening at the build site.
Okay. Well, we are here taking out all the screws from the wood so that we can start sanding it now. So a new phase. I'm getting all the screws out. Brian's pulling all the washers, which are epoxied a little bit to the wood. All right, well, we're going to try sanding the inside of the Forebeam here. The problem is that the Flexi sander isn't going to bend enough for this radius, but we're going to try and see if I can't use it at a bit of an angle and make it work. But we'll try. We may have to move to a different sander to get this to work. But let me get the vacuum system turned on. So this is working out pretty well. This is still going to take more sanding, but that's already getting a lot smoother after just a few minutes here. While I'm sanding, Brian is patching the holes from the screws in the side of the hull and filling any little low spots that we needed to fix. So almost there, just got 3 little sections, about 10 feet to go, and that side will be ready for inspection and probably another round of that, and then sanding after that. And through the magic of videos, a long time of sanding for me is a short time for you. Got all this sanded. Still got a little bit on the end to go there, but it's coming out good. Nice and smooth. So we're getting close to ready for the carbon fiber. A little more prep work, a little more filling, and we've got to fill all these holes for the screw holes and a few little gaps. So we'll do that after lunch. So the epoxy's all been filled in these holes and any other little spots we had to do, so we got to resand this again before we get to the carbon fiber.
Now, let's talk about our head sail. We decided to stick with the recommended self-tacking jib that Schionning designed into the Solitaire 1520.
The normal issue with this kind of self-tacking jib is that in many cases you end up with a slightly smaller jib.
This is due to the track being down on the foredeck, well in front of the mast.
However, with our Solitaire 1520's design, the jib track is up on the cabin top, just in front of the mast, so we still get a good-sized jib, plus the ease of tacking due to the self-tacking jib system.
Before we get to our choice in Genoa, let's check in at the build site to see what progress is being made on building SV Lynx.
We're going to do some sanding on these fixes that we did to spots on this hull, while the second round of fixes we did to the Forebeam are curing. So we found a few little small spots after sanding that we wanted to fill in with some thickened epoxy. So we did that. Now that's setting up. We want to try to get to that carbon fiber today, so we're waiting on that. But while we wait, we might as well get some sanding done. So back into the bunny suits we go.
Howdy, I'm Ken Doherty. I'm a friend of Phil's. I've known him for a long time, and I'm excited I get to help today. And we're gonna be sanding the Forebeam here. There's some epoxy they had to fill, some little voids or low spots. So we're gonna be sanding today, and that's what I'm starting on. So here we go.
Well, we're here this morning, and you can hear Ken and Brian working on the Forebeam, doing a lot of sanding over there. But what I'm doing is testing out our new jig. And what this is a 3D printed jig that I showed you the model of earlier, but this is the finished product here. And what we have is these two nuts and bolts allow us to loosen those up, and we can change the depth that we have on this, and then the router itself can change the height of this bit we have here. And so between these two adjustments, this direction and this direction, we can dial in exactly what we need. And the reason we need this is because if we didn't have that depth, the problem is that you get this kind of scalloping sometimes as you move the bit too much, and as you run along here you would screw it up like that. And we want it to come out better, more like this. And in fact, that's what we really want, is a nice clean edge like that. And so on both sides. So what we're doing right now is testing the depth of this new thing. And so I'll show you how that looks right now. Okay, so here's the end result of that. So we don't have any scalloped edge to it, and it's still got that straight edge there, but it's taken out the foam on the one side. What we'll do now is we'll flip it over and route the other end out, the other side. And now we have it's down to the exact 25 millimeter depth that we want, and the laminate is still on both sides. We're ready to roll. So hopefully we won't mess up the real bulkheads. That's why we've been testing on this scrap right here. And we'll get it adjusted a little bit more. I still think it's taking off just a little more than I want, but I'll adjust it a little bit more here until we get it exactly what we want on this test piece. And then we'll go ahead and work on one of the real bulkheads.
Now, let's talk about which style of genoa we decided to purchase for the boat. A genoa is defined as a sail that is larger than 100% of the fore triangle, which means they go back past the mast to gain a larger sail area.
A code 0 is such a sail, but we decided not to go with the jack-of-all-trades sail. Instead, we opted to go with the traditional screecher.
A screecher is sheeted inside the cap shrouds as opposed to a code 0, which is outside. It's a sail made for light, upwind sailing.
Because of this, a screecher is a flatter cut sail which has to handle higher apparent wind lows. That means it's made of a heavier cloth than code 0.
And that heavier cloth allows us to get something else in this sail, a UV strip.
That means we can use a continuous furler on our bowsprit and roll the sail up and leave it up and ready to use because the sail is protected by that UV strip.
With the lighter cloth of a code 0, you have to take the sail down when it's not in use, whether you use a roller or a sock.
The advantage of a screecher is that it allows you to point higher than a code 0 and will be more efficient, which means faster while sailing upwind. But that also means it's only good for that type of light wind sailing and can't be used efficiently for downwind sailing.
That means we need another sail for light downwind conditions.
We mentioned that the foresail some cat owners purchase is a spinnaker, traditional or asymmetric.
But we want a downwind sail that performs as well as a traditional spinnaker, yet can be pitched around for greater wind angles like an asymmetric.
In other words, the best of both types of spinnakers. We need such a versatile sail because we won't have a code 0 for some wind angles during light downwind sailing. That's why we chose to spend the extra cash on a more expensive new generation parasailer from Icetech.
These sails are amazing. They can sail in winds as light as 2 to 3 knots, depending on the course, and as heavy as 30 knots.
Not only that, but they can be sailed straight downwind or pitched all the way around from 60 to 180 degrees apparent wind angles. We chose to go with a slightly higher weight of sailcloth, 70 grams, so that ours can handle higher winds, yet the wing will help keep it aloft in lighter breezes.
This is our sail for nearly all downwind runs. If the wind picks up past 25 to 30 knots, we'll change to our self-tacking jib and main.
But what if the wind really starts to blow, like 40 to 50 knots? If that's the forecast, we'll take out our fifth and final sail, our storm jib. This sail has its own stay mounted to the deck, further back toward the mast than the self-tacking jib.
And because it has its own stay, which is attached to the mast lower down than the forestay, it gives this small jib a lower center of effort.
This shorter stay has the side benefit of adding support to the mast lower down so that when we're using the third reef on the main, the mast is better supported at the lower level. It's like we have switched to a shorter mast and sails, ready to handle high wind situations.
So, to sum it up, For light wind conditions, we have a screecher for heading upwind and a parasailer for running downwind.
In stronger winds, we have a mainsail and self-tacking jib. But during a very strong blow, we can use our storm jib with a third reef in the main. Is this the perfect sail plan? Of course not. Nothing is perfect. We could always add more sails and have even more options for additional situations. But we think that these 5 sails will do a good job in most conditions for our performance cruising catamaran. All right, well, we're cutting, pre-cutting, I should say, all the carbon fiber here, and just double checking to make sure that the lengths and such are correct. And get about 1.5 inches or inch overlap as we go. So the first layer we put on is going to be full length, and then this is a second layer that go at a 45 like this. And then the third layer, give me one of those. My assistant, Ken. The third layer is another 45, but it goes the opposite direction like this. And then there'll be another layer that goes on top of this, but that's a plain weave. Here we are cutting the peel ply. But this is as far as we got today, because right after we got the various peel ply strips cut with these electric shears, it started misting down just a little bit of moisture, and we really couldn't do any more work, so we had to cover up the Forebeam. And it was getting late in the day anyway. It would have been hard to get the entire process finished up, so we'll start that Monday. All right, well, that brings us to about the end of the video, but I would like to thank all of our patrons who help our project. We thank them for all of their support. And we also should mention that our patrons just had a Q&A session with us where we got to talk about our build of the boat, the solitaire line, or anything else to do sailing in a live Q&A session. So if you would like to join any of those, and we'll be running another one of those very soon, think about becoming part of our patron crew. It's as little as $2 a month. So I'd also like to thank all of you who just watched the video. We do appreciate you and your time.
Don't forget to like and subscribe and click on the bell icon to be notified of our next video.
So we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.